Bob Parker is Vice President of Credit Suisse Asset Management. He's with me now. And getting your outlook for 2010, but also looking at what the Fed may say today. And are we any closer to a tightening in monetary policy?
The answer is very slowly. The Fed, obviously, and the US authorities have stopped a range of emergency measures. So, for example, the Fed has stopped its purchase program of US Treasuries. That's the first stage. The second stage, I think, will become more apparent in the first quarter of next year when we see the size of the Fed balance sheet start to contract after that massive injection of liquidity we had by the Fed in the fourth quarter of 2008. The Fed balance sheet has subsequently been actually fairly stable for the last 6 months. I think as we really by the middle of next year, we'll probably see a much smaller Fed balance sheet, then a very slow increase in interest rates starting in the third quarter.
Point is, as the liquidity is taken out of the system, do we still have, well, the conditions there that were still there in the credit crunch at that time, where banks were not trusting each other's balance sheets?
Well, what we've seen, obviously, progressively, really since March of 2009, has been a significant improvement in credit conditions in the capital markets. You see that with the rise in primary market activity, just in equities and in fixed income, and also reflecting this very dramatic credit rally that we've had. The problem, of course, is actually direct lending by the banks. And if, for example, if you look at American data, you look at European data, direct lending from the banks is still on a downward trend, and I suspect that will probably form a base during the second quarter of next year. It's going to be a slow process.
But are you saying we're out of the woods, basically?
In terms of credit markets, capital markets, yes, and I think that after this significant rally that we've seen in the credit markets, that now actually the credit markets spreads will stabilize roughly where we are, and I think we'll see much lower volatility in corporate bond markets.
Right. What about the global economy itself?
Well, the global economy, I'd make the following observations. Number one, the probability of us going back into recession, I think, is exceptionally low. Our house forecast for American growth in 2010 is 2.8%. For Euroland, it's 1.7%. Japan, 1.7%. I think one feature of 2010 is going to be the divergence in growth. Finally, a decoupling between the emerging economies. And, you know, China next year, we could easily have a growth rate in excess of 9%, Brazil close to 5%, India well above 7%. So you will have that growth leadership in 2010.
But could they be, so that you're saying is the emerging markets are going to be dragging the world out of the mire, in effect?
I wouldn't actually necessarily say that the emerging markets are going to do that. I do think you're going to see very robust growth numbers in Asia and in Latin America. The problem area, of course, is Central and Eastern Europe, and there the economic recovery is going to be very slow.
Right, let's just also just talk about the G3 themselves, the three biggest economies in the world. What did they do next, and what about the general feeling out there that we will see growth, but it will be anemic? Well,
that's been our view for a long time. And I think actually focusing on Europe, one of the problems is actually going to be divergence in the Eurozone. It's quite feasible that we'll have German growth in 2010 well above 2%, French growth close to 2%. The problem, of course, is the weaker economies, notably Ireland, Spain and Greece, and to some extent Portugal. We are going to have very weak growth, and I think that pressure on the Eurozone of that growth divergence is going to be a major feature for next year.
Okay, just a very brief word on the currency markets as well. Just your general take, does the dollar decline continue? Many people are saying it's got limits to it now.
We think the dollar decline will continue, although for the rest of December and going into January, I think a short-term bounce in the US dollar is likely, but that will reverse probably in the first quarter next year. I think the main feature of 2010 is going to be the appreciation of the emerging currencies, and it's quite, I think one thing to really watch is the Chinese renminbi. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see an unpegging of the Chinese renminbi, and by the middle of next year, an exchange rate close to 6.5.
Bob, great to see you as ever.
Thank you.
Bob Parker.